The holographic message appeared above every major city on Earth at exactly the same moment. People stopped in the streets and looked up at the massive blue projection that flickered in the sky. The face that stared down at them was not human. It had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern and skin that shimmered like oil mixed with water. The creature's mouth moved and words came out in perfect English and every other language spoken on Earth. The message was simple and terrifying. The Korvath Dominion had arrived from across the galaxy and they had judged humanity. They said humans had developed technology too quickly and possessed weapons that were too dangerous for such a young species. The Galactic Council had decided that Earth must surrender all weapons immediately and accept alien rule. Humanity had 72 hours to comply, or the planet would be destroyed. Admiral Daniel Harper stood on the bridge of the Aurora Orbital Station when the message played. He was a tall man in his 50s with gray hair and steady hands. He had spent 30 years in the military and had never expected to face an alien invasion. Now he watched as 200 massive alien warships materialized at the edge of the solar system. Each ship was 3 times larger than anything humanity had ever built. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at the communications console with her hands shaking slightly. She had joined the Space Force 5 years ago and had never imagined this scenario despite all the training. She looked at Admiral Harper and waited for orders. The Admiral's face was calm, but his jaw was clenched tight. Down on Earth in the underground bunker beneath the White House, President Catherine Wells called an emergency meeting. She was the first female president and had been in office for only 2 years. Now she faced a crisis that no leader in human history had ever confronted. Around the long table sat the most important military and scientific minds in the country. General Marcus Stone spoke first. He was a veteran of 3 wars and his face showed the weight of command. He pulled up tactical displays on the screens around the room. The alien fleet was positioned in a blockade formation around Earth. Their ships had energy shields and weapons that could burn through Earth's strongest armor. According to every computer simulation, humanity would lose a direct fight in less than 6 hours. Defense Secretary Linda Gray agreed with the general's assessment. She had spent her career preparing for conflicts with other nations, not with aliens from another galaxy. The conventional military response would be suicide. Earth's warships were outdated compared to the Korvath technology. Their missiles and railguns would barely scratch the alien shields. President Wells listened to the grim reports and then turned to the man sitting quietly at the end of the table. Dr. Richard Bennett was the head of a division that officially did not exist. He ran the Black Projects programs that were hidden from Congress and the public. He was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a mind that worked faster than most supercomputers. The president asked him directly if he had anything that could help. Dr. Bennett smiled for the first time since the meeting started. He typed a code into his tablet and classified files appeared on everyone's screens. The files were marked with the highest security clearance. The project name was Operation Midnight Sun. Dr. Bennett explained that humanity had been preparing for hostile first contact for 40 years. It started when a damaged alien probe crashed in the Pacific Ocean in 1985. The technology inside that probe had been studied and reverse-engineered in absolute secrecy. Scientists had worked day and night to understand the alien systems and adapt them for human use. The real breakthrough came 15 years ago when physicists finally cracked the mathematics behind gravity manipulation. Earth didn't have faster-than-light travel yet, but they had created gravity drives that could push ships to incredible speeds within a solar system. More importantly, they had created weapons that the Korvath would never expect. General Stone leaned forward and asked the obvious question. If humanity had this technology, where were the ships? Dr. Bennett's smile grew wider. He explained that the ships existed, but they had been hidden from every satellite and every spy network on the planet. They were stored in facilities that had been built in the most remote locations on Earth. President Wells made her decision quickly. She authorized Dr. Bennett to activate Operation Midnight Sun immediately. The classified facilities received their orders within minutes. Around the world, in places that appeared empty on every map, massive doors began to open. In Antarctica, beneath 1,000 feet of ice, the Churchill Forge came to life. Captain Nathan Price had been stationed there for 3 years waiting for this moment. He was a quiet man who had graduated at the top of his class from the Naval Academy. His crew of 200 had trained in simulators but never thought they would actually go to war. Commander Julie Martinez stood beside him on the bridge of the warship Vengeance. She was his second in command and had a reputation for staying calm under pressure. Together they watched as the ice above them split apart. The ceiling retracted and revealed the star-filled sky of Antarctica. The Vengeance rose slowly from its hidden dock on gravity drives that hummed with barely contained power. The ship was enormous. It stretched nearly half a mile from bow to stern and bristled with weapons that had never been tested in real combat. Blue light pulsed along its dark hull as the reactors reached full power. The Vengeance was not alone. From the desert sands of the Sahara, from beneath the Pacific Ocean, from hollowed mountains in North America and Asia, more ships began to emerge. The Armstrong lifted off from a facility hidden beneath the Australian outback. The Defiance rose from the ocean floor near Japan. The Liberty and the Phoenix emerged from underground silos in Nevada and Siberia. Each ship represented decades of secret work and trillions of dollars in hidden funding. Together they formed a fleet of 47 warships that officially did not exist. Admiral Harper received the reports from his station in orbit. His tactical display suddenly filled with friendly contacts as the hidden fleet activated their transponders. He allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction before opening channels to all the new ship captains. One by one they reported ready for combat. President Wells appeared on every television and computer screen on Earth. Her address was broadcast in every language. She told humanity the truth about the secret preparations and the hidden fleet. She explained that 50 years ago Earth had received its first proof of alien life and had used that time wisely. The Korvath expected humanity to beg for mercy, but Earth had other plans. The president's voice was steady and strong. She told the world that humanity would not surrender and would not bow to alien threats. Earth would fight for its freedom and its future. The speech lasted only 5 minutes, but it changed everything. People who had been panicking in the streets suddenly felt hope. The Korvath had made a terrible mistake by underestimating the determination of the human species. The Korvath High Command watched the human planet from their strategic center, 70 light-years away. The massive chamber was filled with screens showing data from the invasion fleet. Commander Vexthor stood before the assembled council and reported on the human response to their ultimatum. His 4 eyes gleamed with confidence as he described the primitive defenses he had observed. The humans had only a handful of orbital stations, and their warships were decades behind Korvath technology. The scans showed chemical rockets and basic fusion reactors. Their weapons appeared to be simple kinetic projectiles and crude missiles. Vexthor assured the council that the conquest would take less than a day once they began the attack. Council leader Thrax listened to the report with satisfaction. He was the oldest member of the council and had overseen the subjugation of 17 species during his long career. The humans would be no different from the others. They would resist briefly, realize the futility of their position, and then beg for mercy. The council would grant them vassal status and put them to work serving the Dominion. What the Korvath did not know was that their surveillance had been carefully manipulated. Earth satellites had been feeding false data to the alien sensors for weeks. The images they received showed panic and chaos. They saw old military vessels scrambling into defensive positions around Earth. They saw governments apparently paralyzed by fear, and populations rioting in the streets. Everything the Korvath saw confirmed their belief that humanity was weak and unprepared. The truth was very different. Deep beneath the Antarctic ice, Captain Nathan Price watched his crew prepare the Vengeance for launch. The ship had been built over 15 years in absolute secrecy. Every component had been manufactured in hidden facilities and transported through underground tunnels. The reactor core used fusion technology that was 3 generations ahead of anything publicly known. Commander Julie Martinez moved through the ship checking systems one final time. She stopped at the weapons bay where technicians were loading the main cannon. The weapon was elegantly simple in concept but devastating in execution. It used magnetic acceleration to fire a depleted uranium slug at 30% of light speed. The kinetic energy of the impact would be greater than a nuclear bomb. The bridge of the Vengeance was state-of-the-art. Holographic displays showed every system in perfect working order. The crew were all volunteers who had been carefully selected and vetted. They had trained for 3 years in simulators that replicated Korvath vessels, based on intelligence gathered from the old probe. They knew the alien tactics and weaknesses better than the Korvath suspected any human could. Captain Nathan gave the order to launch, and the Vengeance rose from its icy cradle. The gravity drives engaged with a deep thrumming sound that resonated through the hull. The ship accelerated upward and broke through the atmosphere in less than 2 minutes. Behind it, the facility was already sealing itself and disappearing back under the ice. Around the world, other ships were launching from their hidden bases. The Armstrong came up from beneath the Australian desert in a cloud of red sand. The Defiant surfaced from the Pacific Ocean, trailing water that boiled away from its hull. The Liberty emerged from a mountain in Colorado that had been hollowed out over decades. Each launch was timed to happen simultaneously, so the Korvath sensors would be overwhelmed with contacts. Admiral Harper stood on the bridge of the Resolute, which had been hiding behind the moon. The Resolute was the flagship of the Hidden Fleet and the largest ship humanity had ever constructed. It was 1 kilometer long and carried enough firepower to crack a small moon. Harper had commanded submarines before joining the Space Force, and he understood the value of striking from an unexpected direction. The Admiral opened channels to all 47 ships of the fleet. His voice was calm and professional as he gave his orders. The fleet would form up near Mars and prepare to engage the Korvath forward elements. They would not wait for the aliens to reach Earth. The battle would be fought on humanity's terms, not the enemy's. President Wells watched the launches from the command center beneath the White House. Satellite feeds showed the ships rising from their hidden locations. She felt a mixture of pride and fear. Pride that humanity had accomplished so much in secret, and fear that it might not be enough. The Korvath still outnumbered the human fleet by more than 4 to 1. Dr. Bennett stood beside her reviewing weapon specifications on his tablet. He explained that the human ships had advantages the Korvath would not expect. Their gravity drives allowed for rapid acceleration and tight maneuvering that the larger alien vessels could not match. Their railguns and missile systems used old-fashioned physics that the Korvath point defense systems were not calibrated to stop. The Korvath forward fleet was positioned near Mars when their sensors suddenly lit up with new contacts. Commander Vexthor stared at his tactical display in confusion. 47 human warships had appeared seemingly from nowhere. They were using gravity drives that should have been beyond human capability. Their power signatures indicated advanced fusion reactors that matched Korvath technology. Vexthor's communications officer informed him that the humans were hailing them. The commander composed himself and accepted the transmission. Admiral Harper's face appeared on the screen. The human looked tired but determined. His voice carried the weight of command as he delivered Earth's response to the Korvath ultimatum. Harper stated clearly that Earth rejected the demand for surrender. He gave the Korvath one chance to withdraw from the solar system peacefully. If they refused, humanity would defend itself with every weapon at its disposal. The Admiral's tone made it clear this was not a bluff or a negotiating position. It was a simple statement of fact. Commander Vexthor made his fatal mistake in that moment. He looked at the human admiral and laughed. The sound was harsh and clicking through the translator. He told Harper that 47 primitive ships could not stand against 200 Korvath vessels. He said humanity's arrogance would lead to their extinction. He would enjoy watching Earth burn. Admiral Harper's expression did not change. He simply said that he had given the Korvath their chance and ended the transmission. On the Resolute's bridge, he turned to his weapons officer. The order he gave was just 2 words, but they echoed through history. The human fleet began to move. They did not advance in a simple line like the Korvath expected. Instead, they split into smaller groups and approached from multiple vectors. The formation was fluid and constantly shifting. Each ship moved independently but in coordination with the others. It was a swarm tactic that confused the alien sensors. Captain Nathan Price led a strike group of 12 ships toward the Korvath screening element. His target was a destroyer that was positioned slightly ahead of the main formation. The Vengeance accelerated hard and the crew felt the gravity compensation struggle to keep up. In less than 30 seconds, they were moving at a speed that made their approach time measured in minutes instead of hours. Commander Julie Martinez counted down the range to target. When they reached optimal firing distance, Captain Nathan gave the order. The Vengeance's main cannon fired with a magnetic pulse that could be felt throughout the ship. The uranium slug left the barrel at 90,000 kilometers per second. It crossed the distance to the Korvath destroyer in less than 2 seconds. The alien ship's shields were powerful, and could absorb tremendous amounts of energy from plasma weapons or lasers. But they were not designed to stop a physical projectile moving at relativistic speeds. The slug punched through the shield as if it was not there. It struck the destroyer's hull, and the kinetic energy released was equivalent to 50 megatons of TNT. The Korvath vessel simply came apart. The hull shattered into thousands of fragments that spun away in every direction. Atmosphere vented in frozen clouds. The reactor core went critical and added its own explosion to the destruction. In less than 5 seconds, the destroyer went from a functional warship to expanding debris. Admiral Harper watched the tactical display as the first kill was confirmed. Around him, the bridge crew allowed themselves a brief moment of celebration. But the celebration was cut short as the Korvath fleet began to respond. 200 ships were turning to engage, and their weapons were powering up. The real battle was about to begin. The Korvath fleet broke formation and charged toward the human ships with overwhelming force. Commander Vexthor had underestimated the humans once, but would not make that mistake again. He ordered his captains to focus fire and destroy the human vessels one by one. Plasma weapons lit up the space between Mars and Earth as the aliens opened fire. Captain Nathan Price saw the incoming fire on his displays and ordered evasive maneuvers. The Vengeance twisted and rolled on its gravity drives, moving in ways that seemed to defy physics. Korvath plasma bolts streaked past the hull, missing by meters. One bolt clipped the starboard side, and the shields flared bright blue as they absorbed the hit. Warning alarms sounded, but the damage was minimal. Commander Julie Martinez called out targets as they appeared. The Vengeance's railguns fired in rapid sequence, sending slugs downrange every 3 seconds. Each slug was aimed with computer precision at weak points in the Korvath ships. The bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, calling out ranges and vectors while the captain made split-second decisions. 3 Korvath cruisers converged on the human strike group. Lieutenant Commander Greg Foster commanded the frigate Dauntless and saw an opportunity. His ship was smaller and faster than the heavy cruisers. He took his frigate on a steep dive below the plane of battle, using the gravity drive to pull maneuvers that would have torn apart a ship with conventional engines. The Korvath cruisers tried to track the Dauntless, but their weapon systems were designed for targets that moved predictably. Foster brought his ship underneath the lead cruiser and launched a spread of missiles. These were not exotic weapons with antimatter warheads. They were simple nuclear missiles with yields in the megaton range. The Korvath point defense systems had been calibrated to stop plasma torpedoes and energy weapons. They barely registered the chemical-propelled missiles as threats until it was too late. 6 nuclear warheads detonated against the cruiser's ventral hull. The explosions themselves did minimal damage to the shields, but the electromagnetic pulse was devastating. Sensors went dark and weapon systems cycled offline across half the ship. Captain Lisa Morgan saw the blinded cruiser on her tactical display and did not hesitate. Her ship, the destroyer Relentless, was equipped with the longest-range railgun in the fleet. She ordered her weapons officer to fire at maximum power. The magnetic coils charged to their limit and released with a thunderous pulse. The tungsten slug crossed 50,000 kilometers in 8 seconds and punched through the Korvath cruiser's bridge. The alien command center exploded in a shower of debris and frozen atmosphere. Without its bridge crew, the cruiser drifted out of formation with fires burning in its hull. 2 more human ships targeted the crippled vessel and finished it with repeated railgun strikes. The wreckage joined the growing field of destroyed ships that marked the battle space. Admiral Harper directed the fleet from the Resolute's bridge. He watched as the engagement unfolded across dozens of separate fights. The human ships were performing better than the simulations had predicted, but the casualties were still mounting. The frigate Dauntless took a direct hit from a plasma cannon and its reactor went critical. The ship exploded with its crew of 70 still aboard. The carrier Intrepid was swarmed by 3 Korvath destroyers that focused their fire on the larger vessel. The Intrepid's shields held for almost a minute before collapsing under the sustained barrage. Plasma bolts burned through the hull and secondary explosions rippled along the length of the ship. The captain gave the order to abandon and escape pods began launching, but many crew members never made it off. General Marcus Stone watched the battle from Earth and felt each loss like a physical blow. These were trained personnel who had volunteered for a mission they knew might be suicide. The general updated casualty projections and realized that at the current rate of loss, the human fleet would be destroyed before they could eliminate enough Korvath ships to matter. President Wells saw the same projections and made a difficult call. She contacted Dr. Bennett directly and asked how long until the Zeus protocol could be activated. The scientist was in his laboratory on an asteroid in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. He looked at the device behind him and gave her an honest assessment. The weapon was not ready, but he could have it operational in 6 hours. The president authorized immediate deployment despite the risks. Dr. Bennett gathered his team and began the activation sequence. The Zeus device was humanity's most controversial weapon. It had been built in secret and opposed by every scientist who understood what it could do. The weapon did not destroy ships directly. Instead, it created a quantum disruption field that destabilized all advanced technology within its range. Back in the battle, Captain Nathan Price was running low on ammunition. The Vengeance had expended 70% of its railgun slugs and half its missile complement. His ship had taken damage to the port gravity drive and was moving slower than before. He coordinated with 3 other ships to focus on a Corvath heavy cruiser that was advancing on Earth. The 4 human vessels attacked from different angles simultaneously. Their combined fire overwhelmed the cruiser's shields and burned through its armor plating. The alien ship returned fire and caught the destroyer Phoenix with a full spread of plasma bolts. The Phoenix's shields failed, and the hull breached in multiple locations. The ship began to break apart, but its captain managed to fire one last railgun salvo before the reactor exploded. The Corvath cruiser took that final shot through its engine section. The gravity drive destabilized and created a cascade failure that tore the ship in half. Both pieces tumbled away, trailing debris and bodies. It was a Pyrrhic victory that left the human captains with a bitter taste. The Phoenix had been one of the fleet's best ships. Admiral Harper calculated the odds and did not like what he saw. The Corvath had lost 30 ships but still had a significant numerical advantage. The human fleet was down to 39 operational vessels, and many of those were damaged. If they continued the current engagement, humanity would lose within another 2 hours. He made the decision to fall back toward the moon and regroup. The retreat order went out across all channels. The human ships began to disengage and accelerate back toward Earth. The Corvath commanders saw the withdrawal and pressed their advantage. They pursued the human fleet, believing that victory was within reach. Commander Vexthor felt vindicated in his original assessment. The humans had fought better than expected, but were ultimately overmatched. The human ships formed a defensive line near the moon with the Resolute at the center. The damaged vessels moved to the rear, while those with full ammunition loads took forward positions. Admiral Harper opened a channel to Dr. Bennett and asked for a status update on the Zeus device. The scientist reported that they were beginning the final calibration sequence. President Wells addressed the nation once more from the command center. She explained that the fleet had engaged the enemy and inflicted heavy casualties but was now falling back to protect Earth directly. She asked for calm and assured everyone that humanity still had options. Her voice was steady, but those who knew her could hear the strain underneath. The Corvath fleet approached the moon in a massive formation designed to overwhelm the human defenses. They had 200 ships when they arrived in the solar system. They now had 170 operational vessels. The humans had 47 ships at the start. They now had 39. The mathematics still favored the Corvath by a significant margin. Commander Vexthor prepared to give the order for a final assault. He would hit the human line with everything and push through to Earth. The planet's surface defenses were minimal and could be destroyed from orbit. Once the military was eliminated, the civilian population would have no choice but to surrender. It would be a bloody victory, but a victory nonetheless. The Corvath formation began its final approach when something appeared in the space between the two fleets. It looked like a small satellite at first, unremarkable and easily overlooked. Then it began to expand. Energy readings spiked across every sensor in both fleets. The satellite was generating a quantum field that grew larger with each passing second. Admiral Harper watched his display and counted down silently. Dr. Bennett had done it. The Zeus device was active and functioning exactly as designed. The quantum field expanded to encompass thousands of cubic kilometers of space. Any ship caught within that field would find its systems going haywire. Advanced technology would become unreliable and unpredictable. The Corvath fleet entered the disruption field and chaos erupted across their formation. Ships lost shield power randomly. Weapon systems cycled offline without warning. Navigation computers gave contradictory readings. Communication channels filled with static and confusion. The carefully coordinated fleet became a scattered group of individual ships struggling with failing systems. Admiral Harper gave his next order with grim satisfaction. The human fleet charged forward into the quantum field. Their ships were affected too, but they had been designed with this possibility in mind. Human engineers had built redundant systems and manual overrides into every critical function. Where the Korvath relied on automated systems, humans could switch to direct control. The quantum disruption field turned the battle into a chaotic melee where technology became unreliable for both sides. Captain Nathan Price guided the Vengeance through the field using manual controls that his crew operated with practiced precision. The ship's computer systems flickered on and off randomly, but the human crew adapted quickly. They called out targets verbally and calculated firing solutions with backup instruments. Commander Julie Martinez spotted a Korvath destroyer struggling to restore its shields. The alien ship was firing its weapons, but the plasma bolts were going wide as the targeting systems failed. She directed the Vengeance's weapons officer to fire on the vulnerable target. 3 railgun slugs struck the destroyer in rapid succession, and the alien vessel broke apart under the kinetic impacts. Across the battlefield, human ships pressed their advantage. Lieutenant Commander Karen Wells led a squadron of fighters from the carrier Liberty. The small craft were nimble and their pilots flew with skill that no automated system could match. They dove through the disruption field and launched missiles at Korvath vessels that could not coordinate their point defense systems. A Korvath battleship tried to restore order to the alien formation, but its communication systems kept cutting out. The massive ship fired its main weapons at the human destroyer Relentless. Captain Lisa Morgan saw the incoming plasma and rolled her ship hard to starboard. The bolt missed by less than 50 meters, and the heat from the near miss caused her port sensors to fail. Morgan did not let the damage slow her response. She brought her ship around in a tight arc and fired her railgun at the battleship's exposed flank. The tungsten slug penetrated deep into the alien vessel and detonated the ammunition stores inside. Secondary explosions rippled through the battleship's interior, and it began to list as the crew struggled to contain the damage. Admiral Harper watched from the Resolute as the battle turned in humanity's favor. The quantum field had leveled the playing field, and human adaptability was proving superior to Korvath technology. But the victory was coming at a terrible cost. The destroyer Courage had been caught between 2 Korvath cruisers and destroyed with all hands. The frigate Swift was drifting with its reactor offline, and crew abandoning ship. President Wells received constant updates from the command center beneath the White House. General Marcus Stone provided tactical analysis while Defense Secretary Linda Gray coordinated with ground forces preparing for a possible invasion. The president knew that even if the fleet won this battle, the war might not be over. The Korvath dominion was vast and could send more ships. Commander Vexthor stood on his bridge and felt fear for the first time in his military career. His fleet was being torn apart by ships that should have been easy targets. The quantum field had stripped away every advantage the Korvath possessed. His crew struggled to restore systems, but every time they fixed one problem, another emerged. He sent an emergency transmission to the High Command requesting immediate reinforcement. The response came faster than expected, but it was not what Vexthor wanted to hear. Council Leader Thrax appeared on the damaged view screen with all 4 eyes focused in judgment. The Council had been monitoring the battle and was not pleased with how Vexthor had handled the situation. The commander had underestimated the humans and allowed his fleet to walk into an obvious trap. Thrax informed Vexthor that he was being relieved of command immediately. The Council was sending Fleetmaster Korthax with a second armada to assess the situation. Vexthor was ordered to return to the homeworld to face judgment for his failures. In Korvath culture, military commanders who failed were executed publicly to maintain discipline among the ranks. Vexthor protested and tried to explain that the humans possessed technology that intelligence reports had not indicated. Thrax cut him off with a gesture of dismissal. The Council had made its decision and would not debate with a failed commander. The transmission ended and Vexthor slumped in his command chair knowing his life was over regardless of whether he survived the battle. Captain Nathan Price saw a Korvath command ship attempting to withdraw from the field. He recognized it as the flagship based on its size and the number of communication arrays. He contacted Admiral Harper and requested permission to pursue. The Admiral granted approval and the Vengeance broke formation to chase the retreating vessel. The Korvath flagship was larger and more heavily armed than the Vengeance, but its systems were failing just like every other ship in the field. Commander Julie Martinez coordinated with the weapons crew to target the flagship's engines. If they could disable the gravity drive, the alien ship would be dead in space. The railgun fired and the slug struck precisely where intended. The Korvath flagship's main engine exploded, and the ship lost all forward momentum. It began to tumble slowly as secondary systems tried to compensate. Captain Nathan ordered his crew to circle around and finish the disabled vessel. Before they could fire again, 3 Korvath cruisers moved to protect their flagship. The Vengeance was forced to withdraw under heavy fire. Admiral Harper saw that the Korvath fleet was beginning to fall back. They had lost nearly half their ships, and those remaining were damaged and demoralized. The human fleet had also taken severe losses, but they had proven their point. Earth would not be an easy conquest. Harper gave the order to pursue, but not to overextend. He wanted to drive the Korvath out of the inner solar system, but not risk the remaining ships unnecessarily. The battle continued for another 2 hours as the Korvath withdrawal turned into a rout. Human ships harried the retreating aliens and picked off stragglers. By the time the quantum field finally collapsed, the Korvath had lost 70 ships destroyed and dozens more heavily damaged. The human fleet had lost 8 ships completely, and another 15 were in need of major repairs. President Wells addressed both Earth and the Korvath simultaneously. The transmission was sent on all frequencies so that every ship in the system would receive it. She stated clearly that humanity had defended itself successfully and would continue to do so against any future attacks. She offered the Korvath a chance to negotiate a peaceful resolution, but made it clear that Earth would not accept subjugation. Commander Vexthor received the transmission on his damaged flagship. He had no authority to negotiate, but forwarded the message to the High Command. Then he gave orders for his remaining ships to retreat beyond Mars and await the arrival of Fleetmaster Korthax. The first Korvath invasion of Earth had failed completely. Dr. Bennett began shutting down the Zeus device from his asteroid laboratory. The weapon had performed exactly as designed, but he felt conflicted about its use. The quantum field had disrupted technology indiscriminately and had affected human ships as well as Korvath vessels. If the aliens developed countermeasures, the Zeus protocol would become useless. Captain Nathan Price brought the Vengeance back to the defensive line near Luna. His ship had taken significant damage and was down to 20% ammunition. The crew was exhausted but victorious. They had faced overwhelming odds and survived. More importantly, they had proven that human courage and ingenuity could match alien technology. Admiral Harper assembled his surviving captains for a virtual meeting. The faces on his screen showed fatigue and loss. Every captain had lost crew members and friends. The victory felt hollow when balanced against the cost. Harper thanked them for their service and sacrifice, then briefed them on what would come next. The Korvath would send more ships. Fleetmaster Korthax was already on his way with reinforcements. Earth had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. The human fleet needed to repair, resupply, and prepare for the next engagement. Harper assigned ships to various orbital stations and sent the most heavily damaged vessels back to Earth for extensive repairs. General Marcus Stone coordinated the recovery of escape pods and survivors from destroyed ships. Rescue vessels searched the debris field near Luna and found several hundred crew members who had managed to abandon their ships. Each rescue was celebrated but could not replace those who had been lost. The general compiled casualty lists and began the painful process of notifying families. Defense Secretary Linda Gray met with industrial leaders to discuss accelerating ship production. The hidden facilities that had built the original fleet were now operating openly. New construction yards were being established in orbit around Earth and on the Moon. If the Korvath wanted a long war, humanity would give them one. President Wells knew that the next few days would be critical. Fleetmaster Korthax would arrive with fresh ships and a different tactical approach. The Zeus protocol had worked once but might not work again if the aliens adapted. Earth needed allies and Earth needed time. She instructed her diplomatic staff to begin reaching out to other species in the galaxy. The Korvath High Command convened an emergency session to discuss the disaster. Council leader Thrax demanded explanations for how a primitive species had defeated a superior fleet. The Intelligence Division blamed Commander Vexthor for tactical failures. The military commanders blamed intelligence for providing inaccurate information about human capabilities. Fleet Master Korthax studied the battle recordings as his armada traveled toward Earth. The neutral station hung in space exactly halfway between Earth and Mars. It was a small research facility that had been abandoned when the Korvath arrived. Now it served as the meeting place for a negotiation that would determine humanity's future. President Catherine Wells traveled there personally with a small security detail. She would not send representatives when the fate of her species was at stake. Fleet Master Korthax arrived in a shuttle escorted by 6 Korvath fighters. He was an imposing figure, even larger than Commander Vexthor had been. His 4 eyes studied everything with careful attention to detail. He moved with the confidence of someone who had won many battles and negotiated many surrenders. But there was also caution in his manner. He had studied the recordings of the first battle and knew that humans were dangerous. The meeting room was simple with a round table at the center. President Wells sat on one side with Admiral Harper and General Stone flanking her. Korthax sat across from her with 2 of his senior officers. Translation devices ensured that both sides could understand each other perfectly. There was a long moment of silence as the 2 leaders assessed each other. Korthax spoke first. He acknowledged that his species had underestimated humanity and that the first battle had been a costly mistake. He explained that the Galactic Council had feared human potential for violence based on Earth's history of warfare. The Council had ordered the Korvath to neutralize the threat before humanity could develop faster-than-light travel and spread across the galaxy. President Wells listened without interrupting. When Korthax finished, she leaned forward and responded in a calm but firm voice. She pointed out that the Korvath had arrived with an ultimatum demanding total surrender. Earth had not attacked anyone or threatened any alien species. The Council's fears might be understandable, but their solution was unacceptable. Humanity would not submit to rule by another species. Korthax nodded slowly. He said that he had been authorized by the Galactic Council to offer new terms. Instead of total disarmament and subjugation, Earth would be granted provisional membership in the galactic community. Humanity would receive access to jump gate technology for faster-than-light travel. They would receive star charts showing safe routes through the galaxy. They would be allowed to establish trade relationships with other species. The Korvath commander continued by explaining the conditions. Earth would have to accept oversight of all weapons development. Alien inspectors would have the right to visit any military facility without notice. Humanity would not be allowed to develop planet-destroying weapons or other technologies deemed too dangerous. Earth would essentially become a junior member of the galactic civilization under the guidance of older species. President Wells sat back and considered the offer. On the surface, it seemed reasonable. Earth would gain access to incredible technology and knowledge. Humanity could explore the stars decades earlier than would otherwise be possible. But the conditions were problematic. Accepting alien oversight meant giving up sovereignty. It meant trusting that the Council would act in Earth's best interests. Admiral Harper leaned close and whispered a question. He asked if the President was considering accepting the terms. Wells shook her head slightly. She had not come here to negotiate Earth's surrender, even if it was dressed up in diplomatic language. She had come to make it clear that humanity would chart its own course. President Wells looked directly at Korthax and gave her response. She thanked him for the offer but declined on behalf of humanity. Earth would not accept provisional membership under those terms. Instead, she proposed a different arrangement. Earth would accept independent membership in the galactic community as a fully sovereign power. Humanity would maintain complete control over its own weapons and defenses. There would be no inspections and no oversight. The Korvath officers reacted with visible shock. One of them began to protest, but Korthax silenced him with a gesture. The Fleet Master studied President Wells with newfound respect. He pointed out that Earth was in no position to make demands. His fleet outnumbered the human vessels significantly. If negotiations failed, he would continue the invasion and eventually overwhelm the defenders. President Wells smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. She asked Korthax if he was truly willing to bet his career and his life on that assumption. She reminded him what had happened to Commander Vexthor when he underestimated humanity. Then she revealed something that made the Korvath commander pause. Dr. Bennett had not built just one Zeus device. He had built 13. 12 more were hidden throughout the solar system at strategic locations. If the Korvath attacked, Earth would activate all of them simultaneously. The quantum disruption field would extend from Mars to beyond Earth's orbit. The entire Korvath fleet would be caught in it with no possibility of escape. The resulting battle would destroy both fleets, but Earth's planetary defenses would remain intact. General Stone added to the president's statement by explaining that Earth had been building underground bunkers and shelters for the entire population. The planet's surface could be bombarded from orbit, but the industrial capacity would survive. Within a year, humanity would rebuild its fleet and come looking for revenge. The Korvath might win the battle, but they would create an enemy that would never stop fighting. Korthax was silent for a long moment. His officers looked at him expectantly, but he did not respond immediately. He was calculating odds and considering outcomes. The humans were not bluffing. They had proven their willingness to fight against impossible odds. They had demonstrated technological capabilities that should have been beyond them. Most importantly, they showed no sign of backing down even when faced with overwhelming force. The fleet master asked about trade and diplomacy. If Earth insisted on full independence, how would humanity interact with the rest of the galaxy? President Wells explained that Earth wanted to establish relationships based on mutual respect and benefit. Humanity would trade knowledge and resources. They would participate in the galactic community as equals. What they would not do is accept second-class status. Admiral Harper provided a military perspective. He stated that Earth had no intention of expanding aggressively or threatening other species. The human fleet existed solely for defense of the solar system. But that fleet would remain under human control and would be used to protect human interests. If the Galactic Council could accept those terms, Earth would be happy to work toward peaceful coexistence. Korthax made his decision. He contacted the Galactic Council and presented the situation honestly. He explained that humanity could not be conquered without massive casualties on both sides. He recommended accepting Earth's terms for independent membership. There was a long delay while the Council debated. Finally, the response came back. The Galactic Council agreed to accept Earth as an independent member species. The decision was made reluctantly and with many conditions. Humanity would be monitored closely. Any aggressive expansion would be met with immediate sanctions. If Earth developed weapons deemed too dangerous, the Council reserved the right to intervene. But for now, humanity would be allowed to govern itself. President Wells accepted the Council's terms. She knew that Earth would be watched carefully, and that some species would be waiting for humans to make mistakes. But she also knew that humanity had proven itself in the only way that truly mattered in galactic politics. They had shown strength and the willingness to defend themselves. That earned respect, even if it came with suspicion. The meeting concluded with formal agreements being drafted. Fleetmaster Korthax provided access codes for communication networks that spanned the galaxy. He gave Earth star charts that showed the locations of inhabited systems and major trade routes. He explained the basic principles of jump gate construction. In return, President Wells promised that Earth would not develop planet-destroying weapons and would respect the territorial claims of other species. 3 days later, the Korvath fleet began its withdrawal from the solar system. The damaged ships from the first battle were towed by the newer vessels. Korthax sent a final transmission to Earth before departing. He acknowledged that humanity had earned its place among the stars through courage and determination. He also warned that the galaxy was dangerous and full of species that would not be as reasonable as the Korvath had proven to be. President Wells addressed the nation and the world from the White House. She explained the terms of the agreement and what it meant for humanity's future. Earth would join the galactic community as an independent power. The secrets of faster than light travel would allow human exploration and colonization of other star systems. But this also meant new responsibilities and new challenges. The construction of Earth's first jump gate began in orbit near the Moon. Human engineers worked alongside Korvath technicians, who provided technical assistance as part of the agreement. The process would take 2 years, but when completed, Ships would be able to travel instantly to any other gate in the network. Humanity would truly become a spacefaring civilization. Admiral Harper oversaw the reconstruction of the fleet. The ships destroyed in battle were replaced with newer designs that incorporated lessons learned from combat. The Vengeance underwent major repairs and upgrades.